Okay, so today I'm going to do a video that is a bit off the cuff. I basically just thought of this topic and I thought it would be a fun one to do because I was just watching a video by this YouTuber who was touring apartments with the famous like Tokyo realtor YouTuber guy, Tokyo Portfolio. And she was touring a bunch of really nice apartments and it just reminded me of how like my old apartment in Tokyo was pretty much the opposite of that. And I kind of want to talk about how bad it was, how bad it turned out to be, and roast it a little bit. So, yeah. So, let me set the scene. I'm a student at a Japanese language school, and I am moving out of the dorms and basically looking for an apartment of my own for the first time in Tokyo. And I'm not exactly sure what I'm looking for, except I want it to be an affordable place that is close to the station, that's pet friendly, and that's centrally located. Okay, now thinking back, maybe I did know exactly what I was looking for. So I can now tell you my old address and neighborhood because I live nowhere near it anymore. So I started to look at apartments that were close to central Tokyo in Nakano, Tokyo. Now, I don't want to roast this area or anything. Like the area is really great. It's family friendly. It has a park. It's fine. It's pretty quiet besides the construction. Um the area is great. I have nothing wrong with the area. But the apartment that I moved into didn't turn out to be exactly the way that I'd hoped it would be. So I was basically looking at apartments in Shibuya, in Nakano, and maybe some other areas around central Tokyo. And my budget was really low. It was like, what was it, 60,000 yen per month, which is probably around 400 US dollars a month, which actually you can find an apartment for that little pretty easily, but you're not going to find in Tokyo, especially, you're not going to find the best apartment ever. It's going to be pretty small and probably a little bit old. So I think my budget was 60,000, maybe 70,000 if I really wanted to splurge, right? So I was not on a very high budget. And for some reason, I wanted to be centrally located in Tokyo to be in the middle of the action, right? And so I first started to look at apartments in Shibuya, and any apartment of that price in Shibuya was literally a shoebox. I looked at one that like the toilets smelled bad, even though there was no one living in there, and it was a loft, but pretty much it was so small that the entire loft like almost took up the entire area of the apartment. So like there was a ladder pretty much in the middle of the apartment, and the apartment was just one room, and it just was not, would have not been good, you know. Oh yeah, and I needed it to be pet friendly too. So I was like looking at different places and I really didn't like any of them. And again, no problem with my realtor. My realtor was great. Um, and then I actually was looking at myself and I found a place like on my by my own on my own, and I showed it to my realtor. I'm like, can I tour this place? And he was like, yeah, sure. Um, so I toured this place. It's a place in Nakano, and I go in and it looks fine enough. Like it's a little dated. Like the apartment was built, I think, in the 80s. But it looks clean enough. It looks in pretty good shape. The only thing is that it is tiny. Like it's, what was it? 17 square meters, something like that, 18 square meters. So like that's what, like 100, God, why do I have to keep converting it into feet? Look it up. You know what? Americans, just look it up. Okay. Yeah, 17 or 18 square meters. And, but I was kind of expecting that because like I knew for my budget that was probably around what I was going to get. So I was like, okay, I know it's going to be small. It's going to be an experience. I lived in dorm rooms smaller than that, you know. So I'll give it a go. And the place looks good enough as it was. It was in a quiet, nice neighborhood. And it was, I think it was 60,000 yen per month. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go with this one. And at the time, or apply for this one. And at the time, I thought I'd found a hidden gem because I was like, for this price and this location, and it was really close to the station too. Like I was like, this is nice, right? Um, this is not going to be too bad. Okay, now fast forward to me moving in, right? I move in and I'm doing okay. The only problem is I haven't set up my Wi-Fi router yet because didn't even I don't know if I even applied for the service. But anyway, that wasn't great. But everything seemed fine, for a super small apartment. Um, except that when I started to take a shower in the shower, which of course was really small, like basically the bathtub and the toilet were in the same room, which in, let's say, America is pretty standard, but in Japan, that's considered kind of gross because you have a toilet next to your bath, which I kind of understand. And also, it was just really crowded. Like, I had to, like, basically climb over the toilet to get to the bathtub. So it wasn't ideal, but I was still like, you know what? For the price, that's okay. And so I take a shower and the water in the shower, it suddenly starts to make my skin very itchy. And I'm like, what is going on? What's wrong with this water? And it's so itchy that I like literally can't go to sleep. I usually shower at night. I can't go to sleep because I'm so itchy. I'm like, what the fuck? So I I finally fall asleep after hours of like itching in my bed, right? And I'm like, this isn't good. So basically, I start going to a local bathhouse, which is pretty common in Japan and pretty cheap, luckily, every night after that. And I start looking for a shower filter on Amazon. And I find a shower filter and I install it and it starts to work. And I'm like, okay, great. Now, the filter itself works for a few months, and after maybe like 3 months, it starts to kind of degrade. And I notice the itchy feeling coming back, and I'm like, shit. But I'm like, oh, well, I guess I'll just buy a new filter, or buy the replacement beads in the filter or whatever. And I do that, and it works. And so for about 8 months living in that place, this is working fine. And now again, I'm other stuff is also happening during this time, but I'm gonna like do it by problem versus by timeline, if that makes sense. And so, like 8 months into living in this place, the filter stops working again. I'm like, okay, time to change the filter. I change the filter, and then like a week later, it stops working again. I'm like, what the fuck? This is the same exact filter I've been using and changing. Why is it getting worse even when I put in a new filter? But lo and behold, my skin was getting itchy again, even a week after changing the filter. Like, it doesn't make sense. And so basically, for the final 3 or 4 months of living at that apartment, and at that point, I was like, I need to get out of here because of this problem. I was going to the bathhouse every night to shower, and that was exhausting too because like the bathhouse was not exactly close, like especially in the winter when it was really cold. I just like didn't want to fucking leave the house, especially when I was like tired after a full day at work. Like, do I really want to walk? It was like 7 to 10 minutes. And then 2 days out of the week, I think that bathhouse was closed. So I had to walk 16 minutes to the second nearest bathhouse. And I'm like, God, this sucks, and it did suck. And so it made me not shower every day because I was sometimes just too tired to fucking do it. So my hygiene wasn't even as good as it usually is, right? Which sucked. And so that was the shower problem. Oh yeah, and even worse, I called the landlord and I was like, hey, the water in my shower is making my skin itch. I don't know why. Could you like send someone over to test the water, right? And basically they were like, yeah, so there's been no other complaints about the water. So you're going to have to hire your own, person to test the water. And I'm like, oh God, fine. And I was mad at them at that point because, again, I'm not exactly sure how much like your landlord is required to do in Japan versus in, let's say, America, where I'm from. But I get the impression from what I've lived through, that in America, your landlord is required to do more than they are in Japan. Um, yeah, so I basically like reached out to this water treatment or water testing center somewhere in Tokyo, and they agreed to, test my water. I got my own kit. I tested the water myself, sent back the samples. That was a whole ordeal. I had to travel there to, drop them off, which is fine. It was okay. And a week later, the results come back, and there's nothing wrong with the water. Like, everything is at the levels it should be. And at this point, I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Am I going crazy? Is this all in my head? But I'm like, no, it's not, because I go to the bathhouse every night and the water is fine. And the water there is the same city water, I think, that, my other apartment was using. And so it must be something with the pipes. I don't know. But at that point, when I was testing the water, like, I was ready to move out anyway. Okay. Next issue with the apartment, major issue, right? So for the first, like, let's say 2 months of living in this place, I was living in a very peaceful, quiet family neighborhood, right? But about 2 months into living there, like, basically there was a notice that construction was going to go up about on basically three sides of my apartment. There was going to be construction. And I was like, oh shit. And not only was there going to be construction, the construction was going to be for, like, basically new residential buildings. So basically it was going to be 13 months of construction on each side of me. So over a year of construction. And construction in Japan generally is 6 days a week. Starts at 8 a.m., ends at around 5 p.m. And it's very loud, as construction usually is anywhere. So basically 2 months in, I realized that I was going to be living in, like, this sound cacophony basically every day of my life, until further notice. And it was even worse that a lot of the time, my current job, I was working from home. So I really couldn't really work from my house very well. I had to go to a cafe or something. So yeah. And so basically that started up 2 months in. And then after like 3 months of that, they actually paused for maybe a couple months. And I was like, oh, thank God. Because they were basically knocking the old building down. But then 2 months after that, they started up again. They started building the new place up. And so the construction started again, and I was being tormented again. So I was like, oh God, this is just getting worse and worse. And yeah, and that pretty much continued until I moved out, because it hadn't even been, I was in the place, 11, 12 months, or no, sorry, 13 or 14 months, but the construction wasn't even going to be done until May of this year. So I was pretty happy to move out at the end of that. And lastly, the last big issue is basically, since moving into my new apartment, I really, really wanted a pet. And I had looked at the listing, and the listing online said that this apartment is pet friendly. And I was like, okay, great. Even though it's really, really small, I'm like, I could definitely have one cat in here. And if I like take them out on walks on a little leash, then they'll not feel too bad in this small space, as long as I, give them enrichment and stuff. So I was really excited to get a cat. And I went to like one of the adoption cafes kind of in Tokyo, which it's basically a cat cafe, but on top of being a cat cafe, you can actually, apply to adopt the cats, which I think is really good. It's a good rescue program slash, cafe. And so I went to one of these cafes, and I went through the whole process, and like, I had to take pictures of my apartment to make sure the apartment looked safe for a cat. And I thought it was going really well. And, the lady who was talking to me from the cafe, she really liked me. And I was like, yay, this is going well. And then I was like, okay, I just have to confirm with my apartment company that I'm getting a cat, and let them know so I can pay the fee, because the fee was like a month of rent or something. And so I And this was also during a very busy time in my life, so I was already stressed. But basically, I called the apartment company and hold on. I was like, just to let you know, I want to get a cat. How do I pay the month of rent required for me to get a cat? And the guy on the other end, he double checks and then he comes back and he's like, sorry, your apartment isn't pet friendly. And at this point, I'm really stressed and I'm really surprised. And I'm like, wait, what? But no, it said in the contract that my apartment is pet friendly. And I'm like really confused and start to get really sad. And I'm like, and this is actually happening on a Friday night. So basically, like the place was about to close, and so like over that entire weekend, I didn't really get a confirmation, and I was getting like just really upset that I was like, oh, I can't even get a cat. Um, so I actually reached out to my realtor, my old realtor, over line message, and I was like, hey, what happened with this? My apartment company just told me that I am not allowed to get a cat. And apparently he was on vacation, but when he got back from vacation, um, he responded. He was like, oh, I'm so sorry this happened, and basically he remembers when we were, looking over the contract, when I was about to sign the contract for this apartment, my old apartment, he I think I remember him telling me, like, so technically the contract says that no cats or dogs are allowed as pets. And I remember at the time, actually, I was really nervous because I was like, but it's listed as pet friendly. And he's like, don't worry, that's just a precaution so that you can get approval from the landlord. As long as the landlord says it's okay, it'll be okay. And I'm like, okay. And I signed it. And maybe I was dumb to sign that, but at that point, I was already ready to sign the contract. I wasn't going to like go out and look for a new apartment, especially on my budget at the time. So then I thought back to that and I looked at the contract myself. And lo and behold, it did say no cats or dogs allowed as pets. And at this point, I was like, what the fuck? Because I kind of vaguely remembered reading that, but I thought there was a loophole. And so I basically called the apartment company again and was like, so I talked with my realtor. He said, though it technically says there's no cats or dogs allowed, like as long as I talk to the landlord, it'll be okay. And at this point, for your information, the management company of my apartment had already changed twice. So basically, it was the first management company that had managed the apartment when I moved in that basically told the realtor this. But this third management company had no idea that this like verbal agreement was happening. And my realtor even called the old management company from two management companies ago when I moved in and asked, hey, what's going on with this pet friendly thing? It was promised to be pet friendly, but now it's not. And apparently everyone at the old management company had since quit. And so there was no one who was working there who had worked there at the time. So basically this promise was completely void. And at that point I was kind of really sad and hysterical because I really, really wanted to get a cat. And it just wasn't good. And I was like, that was like the third strike with the shower, with the construction, and now with it not being pet friendly. And I agree, like I shouldn't rely on a verbal agreement when the contract says something else. I know that now, but I made a mistake. Anyway, so I even looked back at the listing for, let's say, similar apartment or other apartments in that building, and none of them said they were listed as pet friendly. So it almost makes me think that this place was listed as pet friendly as a mistake. I don't know, but it kind of felt like that. So, yeah, those were the three major like deal breakers for my old place. And it was at that point where I was like, okay, you know what? I need to move. And at that point, I was already getting kind of sick of living in Tokyo for all the reasons that I shared in my other video, which I'll link right up here. And so I was like, okay, I have the money to move right now. I guess I'll do it. And that's how I ended up in this place. It's a lot better than my old place in a lot of ways. No construction noise, more nature. It is pet friendly on paper, on the contract, it's pet friendly. So, yeah. Um, let's see. So that's pretty much the roast of my old apartment. I don't know if it's actually a roast, it's more just me complaining into the void, which is fine. But yeah, in short, I'm really glad I moved into this new place. It's a lot better. I'm paying a little bit more for it, but not that much. And I have a higher budget now, thankfully. And I haven't yet gotten a cat, but I do want to adopt one in the coming few months, as I save up the money required to do that. So I'm really happy that I moved eventually. But my God, that old place was like, there's no way I could have known it would be such a bad decision, but it was a bad decision. So, yeah, for the future, if I move again, I'll be very thorough with everything I look for and make sure everything as advertised is the same in the contract, all that. So, yeah, let me know in the comments if you have any similar moving horror stories or apartment horror stories. I'm sure you do because pretty much anywhere in the world, there's going to be bad apartments, there's going to be crappy apartments, there's going to be apartments you wish you hadn't moved into. So, yeah, that's all for now. Bye.